Hey there, good morning from I hate when he does that. Keep rolling. We'll leave that in. That's David. David, if he had a fully prescribed course of medication, could be a completely normal person by the time we finish lunch. Anyway, this is a Cheetah. A lot of you haven't seen this before. This is Cheetah number 34, and the most publicly facing Cheetah portrayance of all time was in one of the Elvis movies. A red cheetah appears in one of the racing scenes and promptly spins out, and we never see it again. But they were constructed like a birdcage Maserati for the frame, which is, you can actually zoom in on some of the tubing. It's 1-inch tubing, and there's no big tubes in this thing. It's all 1-inch tubing. It's like a birdcage Maserati, a very tight infrastructure of tubes, so it's very lightweight. When this came into our shop, it had a old school Chevrolet in it, and we weighed the car, and it weighed 1,974 pounds, I think it was, with a small block Chevy in it, and a fuel injection system. The problem was whoever used the aftermarket fuel injection system didn't really know what they were doing. The original engine, keep in mind, this is a continuation car from Bill Thomas Motors. This is not one from the 1960s. So this was constructed about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And then the owner purchased it from them, drove it around, and he was having problems with another shop that put fuel injection on his old school Chevy. That damaged the engine significantly. He wanted to see what was going on, and I'm like, I can either rebuild the old school one or we can go all new school. So come on down. New school. So in other parts of this video series, we had an unboxing series on this, and it is a LS7. This is a very special LS7 from General Motors. It's 570 horsepower, and it's been converted to the Camaro style oil pump and oil pan. So therefore, it's an LS7 that already is not needing an oil tank, a dry sump system, anything like that. You can put it in regular cars and save yourself about $1,600 to $2,000 on the oiling system. I myself like dry sumps, but for packaging and getting it into a small car, that worked out great. This car now weighs, as you see it here today, 1,904 pounds. So basically, by changing engines over to new school technology, we were able to pull a full 70 pounds out of the car. So right now it has a, we'll do the math for you, has a better power to weight ratio than a Bugatti Veyron. So extra cool, right? Now, we also have a very special guest in our shop. We're putting this back together. It's a Daytona Coupe. So a lot of people confuse the Cheetah and the Daytona Coupe, as the Daytona Coupe was a coupe version of the Cobra chassis, which we're all familiar with. And this way, they were able to put an aerodynamic body on it, and the car was almost 30 miles an hour faster. And we're going to do more Daytona programming as things move on. Let me know what you want to see in the comments. Let me know if it's Dancing Girls or Daytona Coupes, you know. But this car is a very special car. It'll go home before Santa comes down the chimney, and the owner's been in a couple of times to help us test drive it, because I myself, being 6'2", no way I can fit in this thing. Alan Grant drove one in the 60s, and he told me it was the only car ever to roast his nuts. And so we got some other still photos. So this is where we insert the montage. This is the obligatory cold startup. This engine is fuel injected, so you don't have to pump the gas. The fuel pumps automatically run. We got the GM controller, which is a wonderful controller system. Special shout out to Jeff James from GM and Art Wong from Maita Chevrolet, who always help me with my GM projects. I may be a Ford guy. In fact, when I take blood tests, they find Ford and cholesterol. But I'm also a Chevrolet guy when it comes to the LS engines, because of that good. And we'll talk more about LS engines and, of course, more about Ford engines later. But this is the obligatory cold startup video. We're worried about LS setups. LS and LT setups are roughly similar, but we'll talk about the differences in later videos. But some key differences you can learn now. Very important that they have adequate cooling and adequate plumbing. So one key thing in the LS is this little bypass hose here that is for the heater system. But when you don't have a heater, you should always have a little U-shaped hose there that basically allows the water to flow and doesn't deadhead it against the thermostat. That's very important for breathing and overall coolant flow. Also, most LS engines have a little water passage that has to be hooked to the top of the radiator. We hooked it to the top of the radiator hose here, and it goes back, and it hooks on into the intake manifold where it has a special little spigot for that. Very important for a properly cooled LS. Two ways to spin a tack off the thing. GM has a bulkhead connector and some instructions in their setup to be able to do that. And then also Autometer has a tack adapter kit that plugs into the coil packs on each side that comes with a harness and literally feeds it for an old school tack. If you have an older tack from like the 60s or 70s and it doesn't really tolerate square wave that well, or computer feeding of tack information, you can use the tack adapter from MSD and it works out just fine. We'll have other videos about LS content and Ford content. Let me know what you want to see. I'm going to point out some things I think you should know about, and I want to hear what you want to know about and what you want to do, because it's all about Saturday morning drinking coffee with your buddies, complaining about life. Anyway, this is Steve Wood, Panavia, Campbell, California, signing off for now.